Hey, welcome back to the Ping Pong Flick Show. My name is Chris Wong. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. It's been quite a weekend, in fact, especially in the DC world. There's been a lot of conversations lately. I never got to talk to about this yesterday, but I will now. This is about that articles about comic book writer Mark Millar stating that offers his opinion on why the MCU works and the DCEU doesn't. He believes that the DCEU is not able to get it cinematic, make it more cinematic than the Marvel Universe. This is his whole quote. I'll say it right here. This is from him. I think it's really simple. The characters aren't cinematic, and I say this as a massive DC fan who much prefers their characters to Marvel's. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are some of my favorites, but I think these characters, with the exception of Batman, they aren't based around their secret identity, they are based around their superpower. Whereas the Marvel characters tend to be based around the personality of Matt Murdock or Peter Parker or the individual X-Men. It's all about the character. DC, outside of Batman, is not about the character. With Batman, you can understand him and you can worry about him, but someone like Green Lantern, he has his ring that allows him to create 3D physical manifestations and green plasma with the thoughts in his head, but he's allergic to the color yellow. How do you make a movie with that? In 1952, that made perfect sense, but now the audience have no idea what that's all about. People will slam me for this, but I think the evidence is there. We've seen great directors, great writers, and great actors, tons of money thrown at them, but these films aren't working. I think they're all too far away from when they were created. Something feels a little old about them. Kids look at these characters and they don't feel that cool. Even Superman, I love Superman, but he belongs to an America that doesn't exist anymore. He represents 20th century America, and I think he peaked them. Okay, so that was his opinion, and everybody has their own opinion, and that's fine. That's fine. However, I do kind of disagree with it. I believe it's a little bit too narrow-minded in terms of what he's seen. I mean, yes, Superman 1978 was incredible. Okay, back in the days, it was incredible. You can believe a man can fly. That's the slogan for it. But even then, if you really actually watch that movie, there is a little deeper layer to it, and that is he is all powerful, but he still is helpless in certain cases. He was helpless in saving his own father. He even says himself, with all that power, and I couldn't even save him. And that actually meets up towards the end of the movie when Lois dies. Of course, he saves Lois using his powers and actually doing something, I guess, illegal in terms of fate, but he does that anyway. But that was the whole thing. With all that power, he still couldn't save someone. So that was the little bit of the message there, with underneath all the spectacle and underneath the magic of seeing a man fly for not really the first time, but first time in that century that he will be able to see him fly. Of course, we take it a step further and we go to Superman Returns, and that actually also asked the question. It wasn't just about superpowers. It wasn't just about being Superman. It was about Clark Kent. It asked the question of what is it like with a world without Superman? You know, he's gone. What happens to the world, and what happens when he comes back? Of course, some of it didn't really work out and didn't pan out so well, but it did dare. Bryan Singer did dare to ask that question instead of making just a basic superhero film with an identity problem and just going against a big bad guy. You know, he tried to ask those questions, right? Now come into the modern day Superman, which is Henry Cavill's Superman, Zack Snyder's interpretation in Man of Steel, and that had big questions, big questions. So I think it's very naive and narrow-minded to think that they've never tried anything more than that. If if he's almost agreeing with Zack Snyder in a way to change it up a little, you know, take away the trunks, because that's an old century idea. It's from the old wrestling, what were those old wrestling or acrobats? I forget what it was back in the heyday, and that's an kind of American thing in itself. And so we go to a more modern. Okay, let's break it down. Superman is an alien. Superman is an alien from another planet. He has visited Earth. This Man of Steel was basically more sci-fi than any other interpretation we've actually ever seen. They do have those Jesus Christ type Christian type things, imagery there, but that's not all to it. You know, you have to dive a little bit deeper, and it doesn't shy away from diving a little bit deeper. And it asks the question of, if there is something like that, an alien that comes from another planet, comes down to Earth and is raised by an overly protective father, and surely so, because this world that this Superman is brought into is not the same world that Superman 1978 was. Okay, in that time it seemed more forgiving. They look up at heroes and things like, they don't have that paranoia from back then of aliens among us. Aliens, there's more power to us. At that time they really were making a comic book hero, tried to make it a basic comic book hero film. Richard Donner placed a little bit of message in there, but it's mostly about a superhero. And at that time, that was incredible and that was wonderful. I was born in that time and I really appreciate it. But in the modern times, you have to add a little bit more to it. And I think Zack Snyder did with that. The overprotective father, he was paranoid. He was in a world where people, the military would see something different, take it away, study it, see something that everything that comes here that is stronger than a military is considered a weapon. And they can't trust it. Why would they trust their country to a single being they have no control over, seeing that he's more powerful than them all? So, and that's the question that Zack Snyder presents to us, in that a godlike figure from another planet amongst us, people would go nuts. Would they fear him? Should they fear him? How should we trust someone who says they're here to save us? You know, how far does that trust actually go? There are half people that are trustworthy and half are not. That's realism. That's the basic way we as humans feel, because we are paranoid in ourselves, right? We fear that singular person that can be more stronger than us, another species. They're at the top of our food chain. We're supposed to be the top, not anybody else. We're supposed to be the biggest, the one that is ruling the world, the one is that taking charge of it, and now we feel powerless when this one being came down to Earth. Okay, and that fear actually manifests and actually makes it worse. It into Batman v Superman, where you had a hero from Gotham City who has only been crime fighting in his little city, not knowing anything more about out of this earth, and suddenly this being comes from nowhere, fights in Metropolis, destroys his building, and he's got that pent-up anger. So you have a little bit of a PTSD Batman. So Batman's hatred towards Superman and Lex Luthor's hatred towards Superman is a manifestation of that fear of something that's larger, something that is more powerful, something that they cannot control. And do you trust that figure or not? That is the manifestation that came out of Man of Steel, and that's why Batman v Superman happened. Zack Snyder asked those questions about an alien, an illegal immigrant, and at the time of where we always talk about in political cultures today, in the political culture today, illegal immigrants, especially now and during the Trump campaign, during the Trump presidency, and all building the walls and things like that, or protecting our own. It's actually a very modern type story, if you will, and that's the beauty of what Zack Snyder has done to his Superman, has bringing Superman from back then, plopping into a modern world and asking, would this modern world accept that Superman? Now, a lot of media bloggers, a lot of reviews would like to say that this Superman is dark. And I've said this before. Superman is Superman. He's living in a dark world. The world that he resides in is dark because it is the same reality that we are living in now. We don't want to believe that the world is like that, but we have to know for a fact, and we deep down we know this world would react the same way as the world in Batman v Superman and Man of Steel. We would act the same way. That's the question we have to ask. That's the question we have to ask ourselves. And that's why Superman, Zack Snyder's Superman, is very relevant and represent today. It doesn't have to represent America, but it does represent America, the world of America, and how they think, their military, in terms of what would happen if an alien being that's more powerful than us would suddenly land on Earth and say, and would we trust him when he says he's saving us, or would he one day get jealous? Would one day he want to take over? You never know. Suicide Squad asks those questions all. In fact, they, from that manifestation of fear, just like Lex Luthor and Batman, they create the Suicide Squad to fight those that, what if one day Superman came to the White House? What could we do about it? We can't do anything about it. And that's why I think Mark Millar is very naive, or he's not understanding what he's seeing. His mind is still stuck back in just to see the magic of a man could fly, a Superman that's a Boy Scout. Now, I want to bring up this message. I know it's coming from a Joss Whedon movie, but I think it still rings true to this day. It was from Avengers, and this is when Agent Coulson was talking to Captain America, and Agent Coulson gives him the suit, the blue, white, and red suit, and Captain America, Steve Rogers says, "Isn't that a little bit old-fashioned?" And Agent Coulson says, I think nowadays, I think we could use a little old-fashioned. Their type of thinking, their Superman's own Boy Scout type of thing of saving people, even though he was rendered kind of helpless because of an overprotective father who fed him information that he shouldn't be known to the world, to fear the world. That was Jonathan Kent. That was his fault. But when the time came, he was ready to meet his own real father, Jor-El. He knew that he had to be a symbol of hope to bring light to this world. And so I believe that Superman is an old school. I believe Superman is exactly what he is. He represents hope. He represents all the good stuff that the Superman character has always been bestowed upon from back in the day. It's just that in order to make a more compelling story, in order to make a more modern story, the directors have to look at the world around that character and try to manipulate that world to ask those questions of what would happen when that character would fit in our modern world. And that's our connection, because we're the modern world looking at a central figure that is unbelievable. Instead of trying to be the Peter Parker, instead of trying to be Bruce Wayne, instead of trying to be Matt Murdock, we're asking ourselves to be the people on the street, the people that looking up to these characters, these unbelievable mythological, powerful super characters, and how would we react to them? And for us to react to them, how would they react to us on how we present ourselves to them? So I think those questions are definitely what makes Snyder's Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and for the most part Justice League very relevant to the here and now. Of course, I would rather have seen the Snyder Cut Justice League because I think there was a little bit more message there from before. I want to read to you how this person here, Nickel Bright, had done a Vero to Zack Snyder. He asked him about that deleted scene of Henry Cavill finally getting his suit. Sorry, I'm sweating here because it's really humid. But He said this: I'm rewatching Man of Steel and I'm starting to think that deleted scene of Justice League originally was intended to be more than just a normal Easter egg. I think it was going to be a callback to this line and theme from Man of Steel. All things change, all these changes you're going through, one day you're going to think of them as a blessing. And when that day comes, you're going to have to make a choice of whether to stand proud in front of the human race or not. Clark deliberately chooses to return to his classic blue and red suit instead of the dark black suit. So, Zack Snyder said, yes, I think, of course, it's that, what you said, and that now, in one sense, he has been born twice, once on Krypton, once on Earth, and it is reality that he's now starkly aware of as he moves through the ship. So he confirms that, yes, he is choosing to side with, to protect humanity. He has come back. Now, we don't know if there was more to that, because there were some speculation that the black suit may have been more involved, possibly or not possibly. But I'd like to think of a scene or something where the aspect of Superman just contemplating between good and evil, contemplating in his choices on what he's made. Could he have been angry from all the things that he's done? I don't think so. I mean, he saved the world willingly, self-sacrificed himself to it. But I believe that Zack Snyder may wanted to present another answer, and may another question. Maybe there is a God, a new God, that is coming down and tries to make him turn into something else. Trying to make him turn into one of his own. Maybe try, I don't know how that story would have gone, but I think see the conflict there that would make it a lot more interesting than just Superman being too goody good two shoes, right? In order to be more interesting, the characters have to have some kind of conflict in them. And just to realize that at the end, after all that Superman's been through, he's going to be presented with another conflict, and that is Darkseid. And you're thinking, well, Darkseid was just a concept, it wasn't there. But someone pulled this out from the featurette, that costume featurette, and it shows what really kind of looks like it's blurry, but you can kind of see it, and that really looks like Darkseid. I mean, the left side and the right side. I think maybe there are two concepts. I'm not sure. One has a little bit of script, but the hulking figure is very much there. The one on the left looks a lot more like Darkseid than the one on the right, but the concept in there, and I wonder how far did they go with that? How far did they go with that in order to present that scene? That would have been so epic and cool as a comic book fan, but it would have brought in a lot more conflict to Superman, another question to be answered on what would happen if that type of new God figure would try to coerce Man of Steel into joining him, and then all the nightmare sequence and everything. How would that actually play out? Now I'm going really off topic, but that excites me to no end. That was a huge possibility. But that's what I want to say about Zack Snyder and his universe, and something that Mark Millar would never, I don't know if would ever understand, or fail to understand, or don't want to understand. There are a lot of people out there who don't want to shake away from a world of accepting of a Superman. They want the world to accept him straight outright. They want a Jonathan Kent to show his son to the world without any fear. They want that. That is a fantasy world, and if that's the fantasy comic book world that you live in, then yes, Mark Millar is right. That may not be representative of what we have today. That might not be as there would be no conflict there, and all we do be seeing superheroes fighting the bad guys, and it'd be a basic comic book movie. And maybe that's what they tried to change it in Justice League, and that's why the numbers weren't there. There was no layers to it. There was no deep thought within it. So you could argue that even though Zack Snyder's films were divisive, it had a lot of conflict in there. It had a lot of layers in there. They had a lot more moments for people to go back, especially fans of the Zack Snyder universe, to go back in the theaters and rewatch it and rewatch it and rewatch it, and to see and pick up on a lot more to it than more. There's more there than meets the eye. And And I think I want to end at that. I think I want to end it at that the complexities that Zack Snyder presents in Superman and what he brings that Superman, puts it in a modern world, actually makes it a lot more interesting than what Mark Millar's interpretation would be, which just to have the 1978 Superman, throw him into a 1978 world and have that world be accepted of him. I think that's why it's not that interesting, and that's why he thinks it's not interesting. So in a way, he is right. But he didn't quite look at Man of Steel and Batman v Superman in the way that he wanted to look at it. And in that case, I think he was just too narrow-minded, too naive to even let go of his own past. And by the way, I know everybody told me that there was the picture that Zack Snyder put out of Man of Steel. Now I know that's the Burger King commercial. I think it's the Burger King commercial. Yeah, that Superman came down in the construction work and had to fix that. But I didn't realize there was a picture right below that, and then when I scrolled into it, or someone actually posted it on up, it was a finger and there's a cut on it. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? And you're like, cut. Snyder had a cut. Snyder cut. Symbol of hopes. Hope for Snyder cut. I don't know if we're looking too much into it, but that is the case, and that's a really nice and cool coincidence. But I like to think and I like to hope that there was more there than meets the eye. All right, guys, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.